Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Break his fingers. The command seared across my vision in jagged, blood-red text, suspended in the air like a hologram from hell, accompanied by the cold weight of a steel baton in my hand. I wasn't in my bed. I wasn't in my apartment. I was standing in a dimly lit, concrete room that smelled of mildew and old rust, looming over a figure zip-tied to a metal chair. The man before me was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Raven hair matted with sweat, high cheekbones bruised purple, and eyes that burned with a defiant, feral hatred. He flinched as I sucked in a sharp, panicked breath, but he didn't beg. This was the moment. This was the opening scene of the Mogul's Toy, a trashy revenge novel I dropped 3 chapters in because the villain, Silas Vane, was a sadistic monster. And now, God help me, I was wearing Silas's 3-piece Italian suit. My heart hammered against ribs that didn't feel like mine. The system window pulsed again, more urgent this time, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that nauseated me. I looked at the baton. I looked at the man, Kalen Rhee. In the original story, this was where Kalen's spirit was supposed to shatter, starting a 10-year arc of torture that would eventually turn him into a blackened, soulless avenger who would skin Silas alive. "Do it?" Kalen rasped, his voice like grinding glass. He spat blood onto my polished Oxford shoe. "Get it over with, you piece of filth." I tightened my grip on the baton. The system's countdown timer ticked in my peripheral vision. 3, 2. I raised the weapon high. Kalen squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the sickening crack of bone. With a primal roar, I swung. Clang. The steel baton collided violently with the concrete wall inches from Kalen's head, sending sparks showering over his trembling shoulders. The vibration jarred my arm all the way to the shoulder socket, but I dropped the weapon. Clattered to the floor, rolling into the shadows. The pain hit me instantly. It wasn't a physical blow. It was as if someone had poured liquid nitrogen directly into my spinal column. I gasped, my knees buckling, vision swimming with static. I collapsed forward, catching myself on the arms of Kalen's chair, my face inches from his. He froze, his eyes snapping open, wide with shock and confusion. He expected violence, not the master of the underworld clutching his chest and wheezing in agony. "You!" I grit out, fighting the urge to vomit as the system fried my nerves. "You are dismissed." Kalen stared at me, his breath hitching. "What?" I fumbled for the pocket knife in Silas's vest pocket. Kalen flinched again, expecting a blade to the throat. Instead, with shaking hands, I sawed through the zip ties binding his wrists. The plastic snapped. "Get out!" I wheezed, falling back onto the dirty floor, clutching my head as the neuroshock peaked. "Get out of my sight before I change my mind." The system shrieked in my mind. Kalen didn't move immediately. He rubbed his raw wrists, watching me writhe on the floor with a gaze that was no longer just hateful. It was calculating. He was the wolf of the story, after all. And a wolf knows when the hunter is wounded. 3 days later, the penthouse was silent. Being Silas Vane was an exercise in isolation. The man, this body, owned half the city's shipping lines and all of its underground casinos. He was a kingpin draped in silk and cologne, feared by everyone. And he was currently terrified of his own butler. I sat in the high-backed leather chair of Silas's home office, staring at the glass of whiskey I hadn't touched. The system had been quiet since the interrogation room incident, presumably brooding or running an update patch. I had spent the last 72 hours learning Silas's memories, understanding the intricate web of blackmail and violence he controlled. The door creaked open. "Your coffee, sir." I didn't look up. "Leave it. You haven't eaten in 2 days." That voice. It was lower than I remembered, devoid of the jagged pain from the torture room, but still carrying that dangerous edge. I looked up. Kalen Rhee was standing there. He was no longer in rags. He was wearing a crisp white shirt and black trousers, part of the house staff uniform. When I had freed him, I hadn't just let him go. I'd ordered my head of security to keep him close, In Silas's logic, that meant imprisonment. In my logic, it meant keeping him off the streets where the system could arrange a coincidental accident to force the plot back on track. "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice sounding naturally cold. Silas's vocal cords were deep, commanding. Kalen walked forward and placed the tray on the mahogany desk. He didn't leave. He stood there, hands clasped behind his back, analyzing me. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? You had me in the chair. You spent 6 months hunting me down, destroying my father's company, burning my inheritance, all to get me in that chair. And then you let me go." Kalen leaned over the desk, invading my personal space. His eyes were dark pools of suspicion. "What is the game, Silas? Are you hoping I'll be grateful? That I'll beg." I looked at him. In the novel, Kalen was described as the epitome of tragic beauty, but the prose didn't do justice to the intensity of his presence. He was a storm contained in skin. "No game," I lied, turning my gaze to the city lights sprawling outside the floor-to-ceiling window. "I realized you were boring." Kalen laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "Boring? That's a new one." The headache began to throb at my temples. The system was back. "Leave, Kalen," I said, rubbing my temple. "I have work." "No." Kalen moved around the desk. The system flared red. "I said get out." I snapped, standing up so abruptly my chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf. Kalen didn't flinch this time. He stepped closer, cornering me against the books. "You're shaking," he observed, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Silas vein I know doesn't shake. He doesn't sweat." He reached out, his fingers hovering near my face. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the threat of violence. My knees gave out. A bolt of phantom lightning tore through my nervous system. I crumbled, sliding down the bookshelf. I bit my tongue to stifle a scream, tasting copper. Kalen's eyes widened. He dropped to his knees not to strike me, but to catch me. His hands gripped my shoulders, strong, warm, grounding. "Silas, don't touch me," I gasped, vision blurring. If he touched me, he'd feel the erratic racing of my heart. He'd see the weakness. "You're in pain?" Kalen murmured, and for the first time, the hatred in his voice was eclipsed by bewilderment. "You're in pain, and nobody is touching you." He didn't let go. He pulled me closer, his hand coming up to support the back of my head. It was an instinctual reaction, perhaps a remnant of the man he was before his life was destroyed. Or maybe, just maybe, the plot was breaking in ways the system hadn't anticipated. "Is this a curse?" he whispered against my ear. "Something like that," I managed to choke out before the darkness took me. The weeks that followed settled into a bizarre, high-tension domesticity. The system, realizing that killing me would leave it without a host, shifted tactics. It stopped demanding immediate torture and started demanding psychological warfare. It wanted me to humiliate Kalen, to make him a servant in the truest sense. I maliciously complied my way through it. System mission: make the target clean the floor on his knees. My action: I fired the cleaning staff for the day and told Kalen that if he wanted to stay in the penthouse, he had to clean. But I left the room and, accidentally, left the high-end Roomba running. System mission: starve the target. My action: I told the kitchen not to serve him. Then I forgot a 5-course meal on the coffee table in the room where he was working, along with a note that said, "This is cold. Throw it out." Kalen saw through it. He had to. He was a genius in the original canon, a prodigy of business and strategy. We were in the library one rainy Tuesday. I was reviewing contracts, legitimate ones, trying to pivot Silas's empire away from human trafficking and into tech, when Kalen approached. He was wearing a soft gray sweater I had bought him, claiming his uniform was an eyesore. "You're liquidating the Sapphire Port assets," he stated, looking at the tablet in my hand. "They're inefficient," I replied without looking up. "They're your primary smuggling route." "I don't like smuggling. Bad for the complexion." Kalen snatched the tablet from my hand. I looked up, ready to scold him, but the look on his face stopped me. He wasn't angry. He looked tormented. "Stop it," he said. "Stop what? Stop acting like you're not him. Stop doing nice things." His voice cracked. "If you beat me, I can hate you. If you starve me, I can plan your murder. But this? You saving me from your own men? You buying me clothes? You changing the business?" He slammed the tablet onto the desk. "How am I supposed to kill you if you're not the monster anymore?" I stood up slowly. The air between us was electric, charged with the confusing cocktail of past trauma and present kindness. This was the enemies to lovers friction point, the moment where the hate starts to metabolize into obsession. "Maybe," I said softly, stepping around the desk until we were inches apart. "You aren't supposed to kill me, Kalen. Maybe you're supposed to survive me." Kalen stared at my lips. I saw the conflict warring in his eyes, the instinct to bite versus the instinct to kiss. The window behind me shattered. Time seemed to slow. The sound of the glass breaking was high and crystalline. I knew the plot. In the original story, Silas grabs Kalen, uses his body to block the bullet, and Kalen takes a round to the shoulder, another scar, another reason to hate. I didn't think. I didn't consult the system. I lunged forward, grabbing Kalen by the waist and spinning us around. I threw him to the ground, covering his body with mine, shielding him with the expensive bulk of Silas's suit and my own flesh. The bullet didn't hit my shoulder, tore through my side, just above the hip. A searing, white-hot agony exploded in my flank. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and we crashed onto the Persian rug. "Silas!" Kalen roared, his hands instantly on me, warm and wet with blood. My blood. "Stay down," I gasped, gritting my teeth against the screaming pain. "Sniper! Roof!" The system window flickered erratically, turning a chaotic, glitching purple. "Because I'm not him, you stupid machine." Kalen was hovering over me now, dragging me behind the heavy oak desk for cover. His hands were shaking violently as he pressed down on my wound. His face was pale, his eyes wide with genuine terror. "You idiot!" Kalen hissed, tears pooling in his eyes. "You absolute moron. You used yourself as the shield? Who does that? You're the villain. You're the villain." Plot twist. I wheezed, a bloody grin tugging at my lips. "Shut up," he sobbed, ripping off his gray sweater to press it against my bleeding side. "Don't you dare die. You owe me a life, Silas Vane. You don't get to die until I say so." I reached up, my hand trembling, and touched his cheek. He leaned into it. He actually leaned into it. The touch was electric, a connection that transcended the code of the world we were trapped in. "Kalen," I whispered, vision tunneling. "If I don't make it, the safe in the wall. Combination is your birthday. It has the deeds. Everything is yours." "I don't want the deeds," Kalen yelled, his voice breaking. "I want you to breathe." The door to the library burst open as my security team flooded in, but the sounds were muffled, like I was underwater. The last thing I saw was Kalen Ree, the broken young man destined to be my executioner, screaming orders to save my life, his hand gripping mine so tight it felt like he was trying to anchor my soul to my body. Waking up was a slow, agonizing process. The smell of antiseptic replaced the smell of old paper and whiskey. The hum of machines replaced the hum of the city. I blinked my eyes open, greeted by the sterile white ceiling of a private hospital room. I was alive. I shifted, and a sharp pain flared in my side, but it was manageable. Dull. Healing. "You're awake." I turned my head. Kalen was sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to the bed. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and stubble darkened his jaw. He was reading a book, but he snapped it shut the moment I moved. "How long?" I croaked. "For days," he said. He didn't smile. He stood up and poured a glass of water, bringing the straw to my lips. I drank greedily. "The system?" I asked before I could stop myself. Kalen paused. He set the water down. "You mumbled a lot while you were feverish. About a system. About prompts. About a novel. I froze. My heart rate monitor beeped faster. Kalen sat on the edge of the bed. He looked different. The fear was gone. The hatred was gone. In its place was a terrifyingly calm intensity. He reached out and rested his hand over my heart, right over the hospital gown. I figured it out, he said softly. You aren't him. The man who broke my father's legs. That wasn't you. But the man who took a bullet for me. That was you. I swallowed hard. Does it matter? It matters more than anything, Kalen replied. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. Because if you were Silas, I would have smothered you with a pillow 3 nights ago. And since I'm not? Kalen's gaze dropped to my lips, then back up to my eyes. The tension in the room shifted from medical to something far more intimate. Since you're not, I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with you. You're a powerful man, Silas, or whoever you are. But you're terrible at being a villain. He brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. The system you talked about, Kalen whispered. Is it gone? I focused. I looked for the familiar blue screen. There was nothing. Just empty air. It's quiet, I said. I think I broke it. Good, Kalen murmured. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against mine. Because I don't share. The realization hit me then. I hadn't just survived the plot. I had rewritten it. The broken young man wasn't broken anymore. He was forging himself into something new, something dangerous and fiercely protective. And I wasn't the cocky mogul destined to die. I was just a man who had fallen in love with the character he was supposed to destroy. So, I whispered, closing my eyes as his thumb stroked my cheek. What happens now? Kalen's lips brushed against the corner of my mouth. A promise? A threat? A new beginning. Now, he said, we burn the rest of the script, and that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by letting the wolf devour his heart. If you enjoyed seeing Silas sacrifice everything to change destiny, destroy that like button, and tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you if you found out his soul had been swapped? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.